Hey everybody, and welcome to Pseudo Ludo. This month we are starting off a new series called The Deep Dives, where we go in-depth on a game that we all decided ahead of time and played for the month. And this month we are going to discuss BioShock, the original BioShock. So if you would kindly please join me. Yeah. Please join us, and we're going to discuss this game now. So I'm joined here by Brian and Nick.
Hello.
Hey, also full spoilers, just,
Yeah. This is going to be a complete spoiler of the game. So do not listen if you haven't played it yet. We highly recommend you do play it and then come back and listen to this. But without further ado, let's dive into Rapture.
Nice.
Wow, that was a good pun.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow?
So let's start off with just the history of the studio that made this game. It was published by 2K and developed by what is most often called Irrational Games. During the actual time period when the game came out, it was called 2K Boston, but before and after, it was known as Irrational Games. Headed by Ken Levine, who is one of the most well-known creative forces in the gaming industry, mostly due to this game and one of its sequels, BioShock Infinite. So Irrational Games was founded in 1997. They had some previous games like System Shock 2, which was a sci-fi horror game, and which Ken Levine stated that BioShock was actually a spiritual successor to System Shock, which they no longer had the rights to. So the game had a $25 million budget, and it was originally released on Windows and Xbox 360 in 2007. It sold very well. I think it sold 400,000 copies in its first few months and went on to sell 4 million copies within the first couple of years. And by 2015, the entire BioShock series has sold 25 million copies. We should also note, actually, that Nick and I played it for the first time. Brian, you had played it beforehand. When did you first play it, Brian? When it came to PS3?
2013, when Infinite came out. It came with a downloadable copy of the first one, so I played the first one before completing Infinite.
Cool. Yeah, it was an Xbox 360 exclusive, which I didn't learn until today. But it was part of that year 2007, which is a very famous year for video game releases, alongside 1998. But other games that came out in 2007 include Portal, Halo 3, Mario Galaxy, Call of Duty 4, and Uncharted, and Assassin's Creed. So you can see those are actually all extremely relevant for future game design. Like Call of Duty 4 is like the godfather of the first-person shooter that we have today. Uncharted is the godfather of the action cinematic game. And Assassin's Creed is like the godfather of the open world, Ubisoft checklist type games. So, big year for sure.
Halo 3, just a GOAT tier game.
Halo 3 is just a great game. Portal is an amazing game. And BioShock, which we are going to discuss today. So, why don't we get into what is probably the most important part of this game, which is the setting. So, the game is set in Rapture, which is a fictional city that was built underneath the sea by its creator, Andrew Ryan. And the game is set in the year 1960, and it is in an alternate history world where Andrew Ryan was this industry titan, and he was frustrated by the politics and worldview of those around him, so he decided to build a city under the sea where everybody followed an objectivist mindset, and the term, the most important phrase is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow. So it's all about self-fulfillment and making yourself and not relying on others and doing work for your own benefit. It's based on Ayn Rand's novels and philosophy, specifically Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, and Ayn Rand calls for rational self-interest, and it's all about benefiting yourself and not, working for others, that kind of thing. It's a very, kind of radical mindset. It's most commonly aligned probably with libertarian views nowadays, if we were to put it into a more modern and less extreme setting. And it's a very interesting worldview, and it's really cool to see it explored in this game. What do you guys think, just in general, about this objectivist philosophy?
I mean, I personally don't really agree with it.
Right.
But that's a whole other situation. But I think it's an extremely interesting theme and, mindset to explore, especially in a video game. It's a very literary thing. Like the clear allusions to Ayn Rand, like you said, it's definitely something you don't often see in a video game. So that's a very notable thing.
And then coming from a book and then building a character off of that is like a good path to make it like a villain type character, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very cool when the characters in any kind of story all embody these very discernible mindsets and philosophies, and you can see those ideals clash through the plot, the actual plot of the characters and how they're interacting with each other. They kind of identify those philosophies, and you see the failings in them, you see the benefits of them. It's all explored in this game, which I think is really, really cool. So let's talk just a little bit more, I think, about the aesthetic and the setting itself. So like we said, it takes place underneath the ocean in a kind of Atlantis-type, cyberpunky, Art Deco city underneath the sea. It's very, very retro-looking. It looks like it was all built in the 1920s. Ken Levine, the creator, said it was inspired by a trip him and his wife took to New York City where they saw Rockefeller Center. And Andrew Ryan himself is actually inspired by John D. Rockefeller, who was this industry titan who was self-made and became extremely rich and built this entire Rockefeller Plaza in New York City that also has that Art Deco style. Most famously is that statue of Atlas holding up the planet that you see at the Rockefeller Center ice rink, and that imagery is definitely lifted and placed into Rapture. The whole city is beautiful. Like, what did you guys think when you were walking around there for the first time? Because I think that opening scene when you first go down there is super memorable and super striking.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best setting in any video game ever, at least in terms of being something that's completely just visceral and striking and very, very memorable. And also really specific to video games, because I'm not really sure you could ever make that setting work in anything except for maybe an animated movie or an animated show, because it would be way too expensive to render that in a way that made it so immersive in a movie.
Right.
And I think it just stands out as one of the most, if not the most iconic settings in game history. And like you said, that's more of like the star of the game than anything else. It's just the whole environment around you.
Yeah, you can see the love that went into it.
When I first got back into playing the game, I started in 2017, but I remember that Horizon came out, so I stopped playing it. So when I started it back up so we can do this deep dive episode, I was walking around and I went on my first cruise this past New Year's, and as I was walking through one of like the bar areas, I was like, oh my god, this is like a cruise ship. In the director's commentary, when they say that they kind of came up with the setting first, the underwater city, and knew that that's the direction that they wanted to go with, you can tell that that's obviously the main focal point of the game, is that they put all their energy into the setting, and that's what's going to help tell the story. It's less about the characters, the dialogue, but it's the environment telling the story as well.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And it's cool that they did start with a setting and they tried to find a story that worked in there. And I think they found the perfect story, like this whole idea of leaving society to be freed from the bonds of morality and law and basically just have a free and open market. It's what better place than under the sea? I know one other thing they considered was an outer space themed city, but I think this is just
the sky.
Yeah, and the sky. This is just so much more unique, I think, and it just leads to some very interesting vistas and views and very memorable imagery.
When they talked about designing the System Shock spaceship, they said it was like a very structured, planned out like stack of levels or like layers or whatever. And then when they came to this ocean sprawled out city, that just let them have more creative freedom with the way it was structured and how it flowed differently and wasn't so cookie cutter in a way.
I like how it has this unified art style of Art Deco, which is very iconic and reminds me of like The Great Gatsby, and it's not explored too much in a lot of mediums, so it's definitely, it's very iconic here. But also, as you move on between all the different levels, you see minor changes based on what it makes a lot of sense, even though everything is dialed up to 11 and very cartoony almost. Like, it all still does have its internal logic. Like, you can see the shopping districts, you can see the power generators, you can see the hospital, all those kinds of things. It's grounded, but it's also very uplifted and everything's much more iconic than a real life thing. It's much more cartoony. So also the story takes place in the year 1960. It actually takes place after the fall of Rapture, so we don't see it in its true whole form where everything's functioning and people are living in it until the DLC in BioShock Infinite, which I have not played. But Brian, you have. And we see this decayed world where it's partially flooded and all the lights have been destroyed. A lot of the scenery has been destroyed. It's been ravaged by genetically altered humans who are basically like genetic crackheads. It's a very horrifying place too. We can definitely talk about how creepy the environment is, because you're pretty much the only human walking around in this destroyed city that once was home to probably thousands or millions of people.
One thing about the game, and like you said, the enemies are the splicers, and I know it's from 2007, but the sound design isn't great. So in my opinion, everything, because you can hear the splicers talking, they still talk like normal conversations, or you could hear that they're kind of like in pain, which is terrifying in itself, but it sounds like it's coming from everywhere.
I noticed that too, that the sound design was very wacky. Like, I would hear someone and it felt like they were right around the corner, and then they would be actually way farther ahead. I wasn't sure if it was intentional or if it was just kind of a little
whether
overdone.
It was intentional or not. I think it helped with the
atmosphere.
Yeah,
it definitely helped the atmosphere. I think where it was very schizophrenic, almost like I didn't know if I was about to turn the corner and see somebody or not. And you could hear people from all over the place. It felt like you were kind of going crazy. It made it a lot more creepy and unsettling as you played through.
Yeah, I feel like that might be intentional, but even if it's not, I don't think it's a problem. I think it adds to the game's aesthetic, because it's not really like about the combat. It's more about the atmosphere, and it makes it very unsettling.
Yeah. It feels like you're going through a Disneyland theme park ride almost. Like, the entire thing, it feels like you're on kind of like one of those Pirates of the Caribbean things where you're on a ride going through all these scenes and you have all these voices you're hearing and stuff. It's very atmospheric and very unsettling overall. It's definitely just the main character of the game. You know, we have a bunch of players in the game that are very also well written and well done, but I think nothing is more memorable than the things you experience just exploring the environment. What was your like the most striking image that you saw in the game itself?
I think the entire opening sequence is the most striking and the most memorable. Like, when you first kind of descend into Rapture and the first few combat scenarios you're in, where like you hear a splicer just humming "If I Didn't Care" by the Ink Spots. Like, I don't really think that's a song that has any particular thematic relevance, because it's like a love song, but it's just a pretty famous pop culture song. It's in a lot of movies and shows, and it just feels really weird and like off-putting to hear something humming this. And then there's also one of the splicers is like singing to a baby carriage, and if you go into the carriage, that's where you get your first gun.
Oh yeah.
And, like, there's no baby, it's just like a revolver. It's just like the opening stretch really establishes the entire atmosphere and vibe and themes. Like, everything you need to know going forward is set up in like 15 minutes, and I think that opening sequence is one of the most memorable parts of the game for me.
If you want me to get really liberal arts with you, maybe If I Didn't Care is kind of a callback to the question of objectivism: is should we care about others or should we only care about ourselves? But obviously it also just has that aspect, atmospheric relevance anyways, regardless.
But they are, and they do this in Infinite too, where the songs are like kind of cutesy nods at the themes versus like actual, if you go in the lyrics, it means, like in one of the other songs in this one is like if everything were free or something like that. It's another Ink Spot song, which is obviously a reference to the whole economic disputes at the center of the game. And in
Right.
Infinite, they have, which there's a lot more religious type of stuff going on there. They have like If God Only Knows by the Beach Boys, and Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and things like that are in it. So that's cool. They definitely, it's more like nods than,
Right,
something
yeah.
that's instrumental to understanding the
Right.
themes.
Yeah, more like Easter eggs or something.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you that I think the two most striking images for me were, one, that first scene when you're going down the lighthouse, and that intro sequence where you see the statue of Andrew Ryan with a big red banner and it says "No gods or kings, only man." Like, that conveys to you right away what this setting is about and what this city is about and who this character is, what his ideals are. And I thought that was a really memorable thing to see.
Another one is when you fight Sander Cohen's like minions and that ballet music is playing. That's another really good one.
Yeah, that was my second one, was him descending down the steps. We'll definitely get more into that, though, when we talk about that level, because I have a lot to say about that. But I saw in the director's commentary, which, by the way, was included in the BioShock collection in the 2016 remaster, which is awesome. You guys should all go watch it. But I saw that they deliberately did not give you a weapon until after the opening scene. Originally, they had a gun in the lighthouse that you pick up right away, and there was a fight that began right away. And Levine pushed for there to not be any shooting until after that initial introduction, so that the player isn't distracted and can just take in the scenery and get accustomed to it, which I think is really a really smart idea, because I think that the publisher was pushing to make it more shootery and actiony to, get people excited right away. But I think the time is much better spent showing people the surroundings and the setting. Because we'll talk more about the gameplay, but I think the exploration of the environment was always way more fun than fighting splicers at any given time. Like, that was almost something you did, and then you could go back to exploring, at least for me.
I had more fond memories of the combat when I originally played it. I mean, I've played it through, I think, 3 or 4 times at this point. But the first time I played it back in 2013, it was very significant compared to Infinite, because at least in the first portion of the game, it's very survival horror-y, and especially in the first few hours where you're not fighting that many enemies at once, and you can actually run out of ammo and plasmid or whatever and just have to use your wrench or run, which I think adds a lot of suspense to it. But when I played it, the most recent time, I played it on New Game Plus, so I just was constantly winning every single fight and never really ran out of ammo and never really ran out of money. So I think that kind of changes the moment-to-moment suspense. But Infinite, compared to how this game is without New Game Plus and on a normal difficulty, Infinite is a lot more shooting and a lot more action. And I think this style fits the themes and aesthetic of these games more than in Infinite's. And I think it felt very memorable when I was playing those games back to back when they first came out.
All right, so let's move on to the plot and narrative. So the story begins with you on an airplane, and the airplane crashes, and you wake back up. You're in the water. You're struggling to stay afloat, and there's the planes crashing all around you. You swim to a nearby lighthouse, and that's how you get into the city of Rapture. And you're pretty much immediately contacted by this man called Atlas, and you don't know who he is at first, but he's basically there to walk you through the game and tell you what to do, give you instructions on where to go next. And this is basically how the entire story is conveyed to you via a radio or through audio diaries that you pick up. Brian, is this the first game with substantially integrated these audio diaries? Because it's since become a huge cliche almost in video games. I think it was originally introduced in this game.
I don't know. That's a good question. It's definitely one of the first and one of the most popular.
One of the pioneers of it, at least.
I don't know if like System Shock or any of those older PC games had anything like that. Or even Portal, kind of. Not really, but not, 'cause it's not
and that was the
diaries,
same
but,
year
like,
also.
That same type of...
Yeah.
Not cutscene based, but just dialogue in room based.
Right.
Which I personally would rather have it be broken up into cutscenes and stuff, because I think it makes it easier to focus.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's probably more of a technical limitation, if anything, because it's probably more expensive to render cutscenes. But
they definitely were working on a very tight budget, and they were doing whatever they could to cut corners. Like, actually, there's only three models of characters in the game that weren't just reused splicer models. Everybody else, all the characters that you see, they're always in shadows or far away so that you don't see them. The only three actual models that aren't the enemies are Sander Cohen and Andrew Ryan and the boss that you fight at the end, which is interesting. I thought that they were that tight that they couldn't even for Fontaine when you're chasing him, or for, Tenenbaum and stuff. It's all reused enemy animations and models.
So I just pulled this up on Giant Bomb, that more or less, yes, this is the game that largely popularized that, but there were variants of this feature in the original Metal Gear.
I was going to say the codexes, yeah.
Lunar and Chrono series, System Shock 2, the Fatal Frame series, and Doom 3, but it says BioShock largely popularized audio logs as a feature in games.
Yeah, and I think they did it in a way that probably no game has since recaptured, and it's because it makes sense. Like, they're mostly taking it from this game, and they did it for the purpose of, they wanted you to focus on the setting at all times and not be distracted by anything else. So they gave you these diaries to kind of give you backstory if you wanted to find them. A lot of it is optional. A lot of them you don't have to pick up. They kind of give you hints into maybe the main boss that you're going to fight in that area, or life before Rapture fell. I think it's a really good way to environmentally storytell when the most of the story is told through this environment anyways, as it's done in BioShock. In other games, I think they kind of miss that part, and it's a cheap way to quickly give you exposition or dump story on you.
Just add something to collect.
Right. And in this, it's actually very intentional because it's meant to supplement the setting, which is always meant to be the main focus of the game. So I see why they did it here.
It also kind of adds to the feeling of insanity and craziness that all these characters and enemies are experiencing, because it's just, you're kind of just getting bits, unless you're following a guide, you're getting information in a piecemeal way. Yeah. So you're not really getting all the sides of the story, or even necessarily in the right order.
You're kind of tracking their descent into madness as you go along.
Yeah, it's very, very well done, very well written. I guess more bits of info from the director's commentary was that Ken Levine would be frantically rewriting these and just kind of on the fly making them. So that was another reason that they were so useful in the development of the game, was that, okay, you place an audio diary here, but you can just replace it with a different, one if you want to change around as opposed to rendering cutscenes where everything's kind of set in stone.
Yeah, I've heard he's a real auteur, and he's really visionary, changing stuff a lot.
Almost like Kubrick-esque.
Yes,
very
hard to work with. A lot of stories on both sides of people that will ride or die for him forever, and then people who are this is not how you should be making things.
In the director's commentary, he said he would have whatever was pre-written with the voice actors, and then he would let them read it, and then once he heard how they sounded saying the lines, he would go and change it all, and then make them say something different that he thought the character would say.
So pretty infamously, a good amount of people left the team after BioShock's release, which kind of indicates that there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stress placed on them by Levine and by his artistic process, which, it made one of the greatest games of all time. So it's kind of morally ambiguous as to how, we don't know too much about the process, but we do know that a lot of people left afterwards. But yeah.
Yeah, I obviously can't speak to how it is to work with somebody like that, but in terms of a consumer, I think it's very nice to have people like that in games because there's so few of them. Obviously, there are way more, there's a way larger quantity of people like that in movies and in literature and music. So, and I feel like in video games, it's probably even the hardest to have somebody like that because there's so many people involved.
Yeah, so many moving parts.
There's really count them on a few, on one hand probably, that even exist in this industry. So
yeah, Kojima, Druckmann, yeah,
and Druckmann's new, so
right. And it is cool though to have just that unified vision that only really happens when you have a leader who's going to kind of just force their vision into the game.
Yeah, there's a reason these games stand the test of time.
Yeah, it's that unified vision, that cohesive vision going in. That's not to discredit, the countless other people who had input into the game. But it's definitely good to see the product of a unified narrative. Like they said, a camel is a horse designed by a committee.
Yeah, I'd also add the Hauser brothers from Rockstar to that list.
Yeah. I'm going to just take you guys through some of the characters that stood out to me. So first you have Atlas, and he is this Irish accented guy who needs your help to get his family out of Rapture. At least that's how it sounds at first. And do you guys want to get right into what happens, or do you want to kind of talk about a few other characters first?
You make the call, King.
So Atlas is pitted against Andrew Ryan, who is the now seemingly crazy, tyrannical ruler of this fallen kingdom. He was once this idealistic character who was, through sheer will, built this city under the sea where he could live the way he visioned a utopia being, where everyone has freedom and free will. And this theme of free will and self-sufficiency is directly contrasted to your character for reasons that we will get into later. But Atlas is this leader of this resistance that undermined Ryan and actually caused a civil war where there was an uprising between Ryan and this basically mobster character, Frank Fontaine. And Frank Fontaine basically serves as Andrew Ryan's foil, where he shows the problems of an unregulated market, where he kind of just was completely immoral and did everything he could to push these new sciences called like splicing and what are those things called?
Plasmids?
Plasmids, yeah. And the plasmids just kind of wrecked the entire economy and made everyone in the city go crazy. So it's kind of a cautionary tale of unregulated markets, and there's a few audio diaries where people are telling Ryan that he has to, regulate this and put laws on it and stuff. And he's like, the great chain moves slowly but wisely, that kind of thing. And you can see kind of his folly. And as he starts to lose control, he, out of desperation, turns into a tyrant, which is what he was opposed to. But there was always this hypocrisy of him seeing himself as kind of a god, with all the imagery of him all around the city as like golden statues and stuff like that. He clearly liked being worshipped, even though he believed in the power of man and not God, that kind of stuff. So you have these two, Fontaine and Ryan represent these two conflicting personas. And there's also a lot of side characters that we can get into. Let's talk about the big reveal, though, or one of the big reveals, is that Atlas is Fontaine. I didn't see that coming. I didn't trust Atlas because he seemed too good in this setting where everyone was out to get you, it seemed. But I didn't see him being Frank Fontaine. So Fontaine was secretly manipulating you as Atlas the entire time. And Fontaine ends up being the real enemy of the game, not Andrew Ryan. So do you want to get right into this kind of like this huge, probably one of the most famous plot points of any game of all time, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So you find out that the entire first half of the game, pretty much, this character Atlas has been mind controlling you using a code phrase, "Would you kindly?" And it's this incredible reveal where you're on your way to kill Andrew Ryan and you stumble across his office, which is a frantic research of who you are, the person being sent to kill him. And he discovers that you are actually born in Rapture and you're actually his son, which a lot of this is kind of hidden and not fully available unless you really explore. But you can actually find your dead mother and you can find all kinds of things. But there's this huge reveal with red writing on the wall that says, "Would you kindly?" And then there's a tape that displays how you were mind controlled the whole time. It's this crazy reveal, and Andrew Ryan gives you this amazing speech, basically, and he forces you to kill him through your own mind control. It's unforgettable, I'd say. It's just purely iconic. And I had known the term "would you kindly" just from pop culture, but I luckily had not been spoiled as to what it actually meant. I knew the term had some significance to the game, but I didn't see this coming at all. So what did you guys think about this reveal?
It's definitely one of the most iconic parts of the game, one of the most memorable, significant, I think a pillar as to why the game is held so highly by many people. And also I think it's a really clever like meta commentary on just video games and the morality of the storytelling, because you are just doing whatever the objective is in linear games, and obviously that's just how they're designed, but it's like an interesting way to kind of turn that on its head. Like that type of, oh, do this, please, whatever, whoever the NPC is telling you to do something, that's just how games work. And so you never really think anything of this character being like, hey, would you kindly just do this? And, you do. And then to find out that a plot element is a really interesting and pretty innovative idea.
Levine said the original voice actor for Atlas had a southern drawl, and after playtesting, people already didn't trust him right away. Because playing the game now when he has the Irish accent, I didn't have any issue with him. Like I didn't think about it. Like you said, Brian, it's just what happens in games. Some guy tells you what to do and you go and do it.
I actually think that the back half of the game is like after this, it doesn't hit that high again of like perfect storytelling, and I think it kind of falls apart just by the multiple endings and like the cliche final boss fight. Where I mean, the game is revolutionary, but I think it'd be even more awesome if there was a more interesting way that they finally tackled you freeing yourself of the control. I don't know how they would do it if it could get even more meta or something, but it seems a little too easy to just, go drink this potion and now you're free of mind control and you can fight the big bad guy and, the end. It seems like there could have been room for more nuance if this game had a little bit more time to breathe in the development cycle. I know the ending was kind of mandated, the multiple endings was mandated by 2K and that kind of thing, so I would have liked to see something that played around a little bit more of that idea of player agency in the game.
One thing I don't know is that after you take the potions and you're freed from the would you kindly command, Fontaine still has the ability to use other commands on you. And after you're chasing him or whatever, you're helping Tenenbaum, or Tenenbaum's helping you, however you want to say it. It makes me wonder, is Tenenbaum maybe using another subconscious like control on you so you could do her betting now to take down Fontaine because of their past together?
That's an interesting concept that kind of, first you were working for Fontaine to kill Atlas as a pawn, and you're seemingly freed by Tenenbaum, but does she really free you, or did she just flip you into a different pawn for Fontaine?
That's like the Matrix theories of like the city is actually in the like another Matrix.
Right. Yeah. It's like, were you really freed? And maybe now that you're doing something morally good, do you question that freedom, or are you more likely to follow it? Because Fontaine could have just originally said, would you kindly, he didn't have to have all these pretenses, but he did. He made up this character of Atlas. He said you were helping a family. It gave you kind of the moral high ground and made you less likely to question the nature of your free will. So that might be another hint kind of as to the true thing is like, yeah, you're saving these little sisters. You're fighting the evil guy. So yeah, you're totally free. Like, don't even think about it. Don't question it. Just go do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, it's not like your character is even able to, the character doesn't speak and any of that. So it's not really like you'd even have any sort of indication that he is questioning it. But that is something like, if that happened to you, wouldn't you immediately be like, I'm just going to leave?
Yeah, you'd be a little suspicious.
I guess he kind of probably wants revenge on Fontaine more than anything.
Right. Yeah, he's purposefully a blank slate, but it does raise a lot of questions.
Another question that's really funny is like, how did it, like, just on a macro level, how did Andrew Ryan get people to join him? like if Elon Musk was like, I'm moving under the water, I'd be like, all right, dude, see ya.
I feel like plenty of people would actually join Elon Musk.
But like that's the equivalent, like a crazy super rich person is just like, all right, I'm building. First of all, would like world powers like allow that? I mean, I guess it's nautical like law or whatever, but. And is there any indication that the world knows about it?
Yeah, I think the world knows about it because
I don't know. I feel like there's not.
Because I thought there was like trade with the above water and like.
You're probably right. I didn't do that many.
But
that much,
if you listen to the ending when Tenenbaum's talking, I don't know which endings you guys got. I'll go ahead and say I got the evil.
You got the evil. Of course you did.
You freak.
I wanted to harvest all of them. I was like, oh, there's slugs inside these things. They're definitely bad. So I harvested them in the beginning, so I got the bad one. But she says that your father tried to hide the secrets of down here, and now you're going to go and expose them, or hide the secret of down here. But
that was talking about a nuke specifically, I thought. as opposed to just the existence in total.
And probably just like the sketchy shit going on down there with like genetic
like the plasmids
experiments
and
the little kids.
Yeah.
Big daddies. Or wait, are the big daddies people under there?
So the original, they went through a lot of design changes, but the originally, and I don't know if this was preserved, is that they were originally the builders of the city, and that's why they have nautical designs of like divers, and why they're like industrial looking with like drills and stuff like that, was that they were changed, like in game they were changed from building the city to protecting the city. And so I think they were originally humans, but they had to go, like you go through that. When you become a Big Daddy, you go through the process where they give you the pheromones and they give you the voice changer and the armor and stuff, and there's a selection process. So I think they're enhanced humans. They're not.
But are they just like in on that, like just walking around with these little sisters?
I think it's probably a mind
control,
like plasmid.
They said it was a one-way street. Like once you become a Big Daddy, there wasn't like.
Yeah, I think they kind of give you just an animalistic like protect this thing, and that's like all they're thinking about at that point.
Yeah, that's like another free will thing. Like, what the fuck are they doing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of interesting questions. And so let's talk a little bit about the side characters and the levels. So through pretty much every level, it's got a theme, which is really cool, and it makes it a lot more video gamey. That like there's, the different types of levels, just like how Mario games have like a water level, an ice level, that kind of thing. But they're all based around sectors of a city. And each place you are introduced to new characters. In the first big one, like the medical ward, you fight Dr. Steinman, who is like this plastic surgeon who, because of plasmids, is able to make much bigger changes to people and genetically alter them and make these freaks. And you kind of see his descent into madness, as you do with a lot of the other characters. And I thought he was really interesting. I thought that whole story was really gripping, of how you see him start to go crazier and crazier. And he doesn't see the people that he works on. He only sees them as a canvas for his own twisted playing of God and trying to achieve his own conceited version of perfection. I thought that was really cool. That one really stood out to me. But I think the person that stood out to me most was Sander Cohen, who is the artist who runs kind of the entertainment district of the city. And you kind of see him just being absolutely crazy. What was your favorite setting? Or favorite level and character in this game?
I think if you're talking about like in the area way, I feel like Sander Cohen's is probably the coolest outside of any significant plot moments.
I'll read out the areas. So there's the lighthouse / entrance area. There's the medical pavilion with Dr. Steinman. There's Neptune's bounty, where the main boss at the end is a smuggler. I forget his name. I don't know. Arcadia, which is the oxygen supply place where there's a forest underwater to provide oxygen to the rest of the city. There's the farmer's market. There's Fort Frolic, which is where there's an entertainment shopping district, go see plays, stuff like that, which is run by Sander Cohen. There's Hephaestus, which is the power district that uses volcano vents to power the city, which is another really cool area. The Rapture Central Control, which is Ryan's office, where the Would You Kindly reveal takes place. Then there's Olympus Heights and Apollo Square, which are more residential areas. And then there's the final level where you take control of a Big Daddy and go to Fontaine's lair and defeat him.
I think the Point Prometheus, the area where you're getting the Big Daddy stuff, is also really cool. Like the library and like the induction, like all like the
very
like
research lab
areas.
Yeah,
those are cool too.
There's like kind of like a boot camp area too. It was like candidate
selection or something,
training or something like that.
Yeah, that's cool. Anything where you can see the underside of the city and see its like internals, like how it's working on a day-to-day basis, is very cool. Because the fact that it's all apocalyptic and destroyed now, you can only imagine what it looked like, which obviously saves, assets and stuff developing, but also lets your imagination kind of take hold of what this city was like in its glory.
One thing I wanted to know about the main, or like the first act of the game, I guess, is the parallel between Sander Cohen and the Doctor and this like real shallow like hollowness that they have. Like they're both obsessed with like legacy, fame, beauty, but like on a real superficial level that crosses over into like a gruesome, horrifying, with death and murder and stuff. But just like that's an interesting point that both of them are like they've gone to the point where they cannot do anything else but try and perfect something that doesn't really matter. Both of their things are pretty superficial, especially in the setting where there's nobody there to even consume any of the shit that they're working on. You know what I mean? It's just an interesting point that they include characters that have that similar motivation.
I can't help but wonder if that's partly inspired by the game making design process, because the people making this game are artists themselves. So I wonder if they kind of see that as like the thing to be wary of, like don't fall into this crazy obsession with perfection or creation. Think about who you're sharing it with, that kind of thing. I don't know.
For something that might not even be
possible.
Yeah. Perfection can never be achieved, and I think the more you strive and become obsessed with it, the more farther away you get. Yeah. Nick, what was your favorite level in the game, for lack of a better word?
You both brought up good levels, but I think one of the areas that I found most interesting was the like main hall outside of Ryan's office before you open like the door. On the pillars when he has all the bodies hung up and his the giant statue bust is in the middle. Mm-hmm. I think it's just real indicative of how he saw himself and how he was willing to do whatever it took to keep himself in the position that he was and keep Rapture going.
Yeah, he's definitely a narcissist. I think a lot of the characters are, and it raises the question when you see him so insane and just like paranoid. Was he always like this, or what made him like this? Do you know what I mean? Was he always this crazy, and was he just hiding it, or did this city bring it out in him? It's an interesting question, I think, and it's one that's brought up a lot by seeing his ideals, his kind of idealistic nature clash with who you're facing now, kind of a fallen angel, almost like a fallen from grace man. It's interesting. But I think Fort Frolic for me was the strongest level in terms of just like the exploration, the iconic setting, and the characters in it. I thought everything about that was just probably like the perfect example of what this whole game is all about, is like going to these levels and exploring it and seeing the real life that happened in that city, and then facing basically the flaws or the sins that caused its downfall. So this place is run by this crazy artist, Sander Cohen, who's now searching to make his masterpiece, and it's very morbid. He asks you to kill his former associates and take pictures of their body, and he puts them in these plaster molds and paintings. It's super creepy and just really incredible. Brian, you mentioned earlier the ballet. It's the Nutcracker song. I forgot the name of it, but it's that song, and he asks you to kill a bunch of people. Basically, he sends his goons at you while that song is playing, and you felt like you were on stage performing a show. It didn't feel like it was hard or a challenge, like a survival mode of zombies or something. It felt like you were performing for him, which was really, really cool. And it also brings up that choice again, like why did you do what he wanted? And I actually saw somewhere, I was like reading about just the whole game earlier this weekend. I saw those enemies are given less health on purpose so that they were easier to fight and it felt more fun or more performance. Yeah, exactly. It was super striking, just an amazing moment. And that song has come up in a number of games. It was also in Edith Finch in a very iconic moment.
Which scene? When was it? Canning Factory?
No, the baby
bathtub.
Yeah, the bath. Yeah, well, we don't want to spoil that probably, but
God tier game.
Amazing.
I forgot about the bathtub. I think about the Canning Factory a lot, to be honest.
I have too. Yeah, I could see how it has relevance in just like the grind of life. But maybe we'll have a deep dive on that game at some point. I'd be down.
That'd be a good one.
That game's awesome.
But yeah, so I just thought that game that level was so cool with him. I thought it was really cool that it came at the right time because you were dealing with Atlas and Ryan, and these two forces at play throughout the whole game. And then it's kind of, he literally stops you in your tracks. You're about to get onto the bathysphere subway system to go to kill Ryan or whatever. And this, like, really, it's almost comical, this, like, giant bunny mask and these, like, dancers come down and these purple lights come on, and he, like, invites you into his sector of the city where he's the king. And it's literally, he calls it, like, a break from Ryan and Atlas, and that's what it is for the gameplay, but also for the story. It's really, really cool.
Did you guys kill him after?
No, I did not. And
No,
I thought that was also very cool that he was almost a neutral force. Like, he didn't care that you were dead or alive. He just wanted you to help him with his masterpiece, and he didn't kill you.
Did you kill him, Bri?
I didn't kill him when I originally played the game, but in this playthrough I killed him, and then I saw that if you take a picture of him, you get a trophy, which is hilarious. Called
really?
Irony. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, yeah, you can meet him again. You can meet him again, I think, at Apollo Square or Olympus Heights. Somewhere you can go to his apartment or something, and you also have the option to kill him there. But I didn't actually find that. I just saw that later online. Yeah, I just thought he was a very well-written, well-done villain to have because his desires are so different from what you normally see in a villain. Like, although it still involves violence, he's more motivated by art.
It is interesting, especially because most of the time when you think of art, it's an inward expression, but usually people create art and become obsessed with creating art to show other people and to be recognized as great. And he's doing it for nobody except for his goons, I guess, which I don't really know who they consist of. But it's mostly just for himself and for what he deems as perfect, which is obviously not possible.
Right. Yeah, it was so cool with, like, the spotlights, the lights and everything. Very cinematic feeling and very well done, I think, overall. I think it's just the strongest level, well-paced, interesting things to see. Like, that's where you find Andrew Ryan's former lover, who it's revealed that she was pregnant and sold the fetus, and you don't know what happened yet, but she sold it to Tenenbaum and to Fontaine, and that it actually becomes you in the future, which is really cool.
That was in, like, the red light district, right?
Yeah.
So is it implied she was, like, a call girl or something?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but that's interesting.
Another character that stood out was Bridget Tenenbaum, who is a former German scientist, I think, and she joined Rapture as a scientist, as a geneticist working for Fontaine. And she's interesting because she's actually a villain, and she turns into maybe a helpful person, maybe a good person.
From what they show you.
From what they show you, yeah. From any subtext, maybe not, but as she undergoes this transformation, which she describes as her maternal instinct kicking in as she starts to pity the little girls that she's turned into these atom harvesting machines.
See, that's one thing. All right, can you break this down for me? Like, what does that even mean? Like, they go around and collect the atom, but for what and for who?
Because the atom is just like the resource that powers this crazy industry of plasmids and all that. Like, you need the atom for that. It's the genetic material. And there's some hidden diaries. I don't know if they're hidden, but there's some diaries that basically she discovers from these sea slugs that have the ability to repair a man's broken hands because he got bit by a sea slug. So she caught the sea slug and studied it. And the only way to make more of them, or the best way to make more of them, was to implant them into the little girls. And then the little girls somehow converted, they became like miniature atom factories. And I think the harvesting was they were harvesting it from, like, the dead creatures and stuff to harvest kind of their life force out.
Taking it back.
Taking it back. They have, like, this genetic drive to harvest the atom.
So does it imply that is still going on? Like, or was that going on before Rapture fell?
They were.
Like, that's what I was.
I don't think they were harvesting. I think you see them kind of fallen from their main goal and reduced to it, but they were seen as, like, there's, like, a lot of advertisements and radio things about, like, how the little girls were taken to produce Adam, and then the big daddies were still around to protect them. I don't know when in the timeline that happens. Like, probably because of the splicers, they were beginning to get threatened because of their atom levels, like that the people addicted to the plasmids or whatever would kill them for it, and that's why they needed big daddies. So I'm not sure exactly, like, how many years this was happening for and whatnot. But regardless, this doctor becomes sympathetic to them, and eventually enlist you to save them and rescue them. And you do this successfully. You defeat the final boss who's preventing you from leaving, and you take the little sisters and you get out of Rapture.
Unless you're Nick.
Unless you're Nick and you harvest them
Absolutely.
like a soulless idiot.
Well, I wanted all that Adam.
Yeah. How about, we can segue right there into the gameplay. So this game is a first-person shooter and light RPG where you can fight with guns and also with these genetic-based powers called plasmids, which can either give you stat bonuses in various things like better hacking and that kind of thing, or really fun, almost superpowers where you can set people on fire or freeze them or shock them. What did you guys take away as your favorite powers? Like, what was your play style? Did you have one that kind of naturally developed that you liked?
I would use the electricity mostly because I would stun whatever splicers were around me. It even worked on Big Daddy. You'd stun them and then you could shoot them and kill them easily. And then it worked differently than the ice because if you used the ice to freeze them, once you killed them, you weren't able to collect any loot. So using the stunning ability of electricity would let me get all the loot and stuff that I needed.
Atlas called that the 1-2. Right? He's like, give him the old 1-2.
What is it? Zap and whack?
Yeah, zap and whack with the wrench. Yeah, I think my favorite was the fire one. I just thought it was really cool that very visually fun to play where you snap your fingers and someone 20 feet away from you catches on fire. I just thought that was really cool. And in games where you have conservative ammo, I usually tend not to use it until I am at the max capacity. So I would only start using a gun when I couldn't collect any more ammo on it. So I kind of rotated based on what I had a lot of. A lot of the time I just used my wrench.
One of the things that I liked about both the electricity and the fire was that depending on the environment, if there was water on the ground if there's water on the ground, you could use the electricity and you could shock the water and it would kill everyone that was standing in it. And then there's also like oil slicks and stuff that were around and you could use the fire to set everyone on fire that way too.
Yeah, that was really cool. Another plasmid I really liked but didn't use as much because it wasn't as powerful as the fire one was the bee thing, because I just thought that's like the most obscure and unique weapons in any game I've ever played, where you literally just shoot a swarm of bees at enemies.
Can you add a not the bees soundbite here?
What is that? What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah! Open my eyes! Eyes! Ah!
Another one that I used a lot was the telekinesis. When I was running low on ammo, you could literally pick up any loose object in that game, like chairs or books or gasoline tanks, whatever, and then just throw them at the enemies.
Nick, you'd really like Control. The telekinesis in that is so fun.
Wish I had a PS4 Pro so I could play it.
It doesn't run well on PS4 Pro either. You just got to buckle up and watch the slideshow.
I'll just wait till PS5 when it's $5 and I'll play it.
It might not be backwards compatible. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Okay, so where were we? We're talking about another thing. This was one of those first immersive sim games where you can really tackle the combat in any way you see fit. Obviously, this is a 2007 game, so iterations have done it better since, but you could, like Nick said, shock the water or set oil slicks on fire. You could hack the cameras and turrets to attack enemies. There was some light stealth that I never even tried to use because that's just not really that interesting. And yeah, it was really influential in that genre of giving the players freedom, at least limited freedom, to tackle combat in interesting and almost intuitive ways where, oh yeah, there's water, so I should be able to shock the enemies that are in that. That just makes sense. And I think that's really, really cool that they deliberately tried to do that. And the one thing I didn't really like was the hacking minigame. What did you guys think about that?
I never liked those, so yeah. I like that you can skip it.
I like doing those. Before, when they started getting like the full level of difficulty, I kind of stopped doing them. But when they were like easier a little bit, I enjoyed them. I didn't mind.
They're just in so many things.
Yeah, they're in too many things. I think I would like it more in a game like Fallout or Skyrim or whatever, like the lockpicking minigame, because those aren't as much about a streamlined experience. It's more about this free agency and doing things and building characters. In a game where it's just a corridor shooter like BioShock, I don't really ever want to stop and move out of the environment and move into a separate screen where I have to do some weird lining up all the pipes and stuff during a timer. It's not as cohesive as the rest of the game for me. So I used, like Brian said, I'm glad they gave you other options. I used the hacking auto hack items as often as I could, and I never really had a problem with running out of those, so that was cool. One of the most iconic things of the game is the Big Daddy fights, where you defeat the Big Daddies, which are these roaming bosses throughout the levels, in order to get to the Little Sisters, where you then have the choice to either kill them and harvest them for all of the Adam that they carry, or to free them for less of a reward, but, to be not a terrible person. Nick?
Huh?
And one thing I thought was really cool was this was core to the development of the game, where they had this concept as far back as like the early 2000s, it sounded like, that they wanted these different AIs working together in a level, and they wanted to have the Protector and they wanted to have the Harvester. Originally, the Little Sisters were actually the sea slugs that are now implanted in them, but at first they were these creatures that automatically carried the Atom and harvested it. And they found that people weren't getting attached to these because they were gross slugs and not anything that you'd be sympathetic for. And no one ever wanted to save them. They would just harvest them. So they changed it to these little girls and made it so that...
It still didn't work.
It still didn't work, apparently, yeah.
Nope.
One thing Levine said is he actually... It's all about exploring the morality of would you save them or not in the subjectivist society where you're supposed to only be self-interested. Are you going to go out of your way and take an actual hit to make the game harder for you to help others? And one thing Levine said he regrets about the game is that he made it too easy to take the good choice. It should have been harder, he said, because you only get 10% less Adam throughout the entire game by saving the Little Sisters. And he said it should have been a more detrimental, a more meager reward, because everyone's more likely to, just out of curiosity, go for the good ending and see it rather than lose a little bit of Adam, because he wanted to basically make it way harder and more morally, taxing, which I think would have been interesting to take a bigger hit on the Adam. Because when I found out you really weren't losing anything, I was like, oh yeah, why would I do this?
I did not know that it was only a 90% total.
Like, based on the vending machines where you're buying plasmids and stuff, I never really was out of currency, and I never really needed more for anything. I was like, yeah.
After the reveal, I started saving all the Little Sisters.
Uh-huh.
And then I didn't realize they gave you gift bears with Adam in it, so I didn't know that's how you would get Adam.
Yeah. No, you're just a bad person. It's okay.
Well, I wanted to be strong.
I just want to be pure.
But I do think it's a great idea to have these optional boss fights, and they intentionally put an exclusive currency behind these fights, and that's the only way to get them is to take on these bosses. And the whole idea of them being throughout the level is that you have the freedom to attack them whenever you want, which I thought was awesome, that they don't just aggro on sight. You have to actually harm the Little Sister or harm them before they turn around and attack you. And that's really cool because you can clear out the level and then go back when you're ready to take them on. But you also have to make sure if you're fighting other things not to accidentally shoot a Big Daddy or shoot a Little Sister or put them in danger. Apparently it was originally going to be a much more intuitive and comprehensive AI, but players weren't even noticing, so they kind of scrapped it to save resources. But I still like the idea a lot. I think obviously these characters are what you think of when you think of BioShock, is the Big Daddy in their suits and the Little Sisters.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, outside of the context of just a boss fight, I think they are an extreme success in just the way they're designed and the way they look. It's just like a really haunting and strange juxtaposition of like these little girls that are seemingly so innocent but also pretty off-putting and creepy with these gigantic hulking monster things that don't talk and just like groan, and the way the Little Sisters talk, like, oh, Mr. Bubbles, and like just like this is the shit they say is really weird, and it's really
every single
memorable.
time they said I see angels, I get a little like uncomfortable.
Yeah, they repeat the same lines in the last section a lot, and it was getting on my nerves. The proving grounds. They say they're like, oh, we're gonna see the angels falling from the sky or something like that.
Yeah.
All right,
You're pretty good at
we
that
get
voice,
it.
by the way.
That's because I did the voice acting.
When when you were young,
2007, Brian probably could have.
he probably didn't even have
could've
to
now.
alter the pitch right there. He would have just sounded like it. It really does give you that sympathy right away, though, when you kill the first Big Daddy that's guarding them, and you see it running for cover. The little sister's basically pleading for you to get away and stuff. Looks very scared. It was always made me feel really bad when I would kill a Big Daddy, and like the sister was like, "No, Mr. Bubbles, please get up." Like, I don't know. It was just really.
Oh yeah, it made me feel terrible.
Nick was
That's
licking
every
his-
time you say
licking
something
his
about the
chops.
morality, I laugh because Nick clearly was just like murdering all these people.
Heavy breathing, chasing after the sister, getting 10 extra atoms so he can buy an upgrade to his hacking speed or something. Yeah, it's super iconic and really fun fights. Really fun that they're moving around the level. It makes it feel a lot more living and breathing, and that sometimes the little sisters aren't there and you have to wait for the Big Daddy to go over and knock on the hole, and then they'll come up and start harvesting the bodies. Super, super cool. Let's talk a little bit about the Would You Kindly a little bit more and kind of the meta commentary around it, especially in context of the two endings, because Ken Levine didn't want the multiple endings, and he always has said that the theme of the game is about this meta theme of the lack of choice, and the fact that you can choose which ending you have is kind of counterintuitive to that. It was more of a publisher decision. He also said he wasn't happy with a bad ending at all. Sorry, Nick. And he was pretty proud of how he wrote the good ending, but he didn't like the bad ending at all. And he said if he was allowed to only do one ending, it would have been much more ambiguous and a lot less good or evil, more about the finding the balance in between and how the choices we make define us or don't define us, that kind of thing.
They're both kind of like non-endings, though. They're really quick.
Yeah, they are.
Like 30-second, like, and this happens, and this is over.
Very Fallouty, very much just... I think that was just the style of the time, was like choose your ending. Ooh, your choices matter. Because that was in Fallout, Infamous, all kinds of things back
But
then.
Fallout's actually, like, it actually does matter, right?
There's a lot more choices to make in Fallout, and it's a lot less, you did the good thing or the bad thing.
Yeah.
But it's still... At the end
Infamous,
of the day, yeah, Infamous.
Would you rather save 10 doctors or not?
Yeah, it's like, do you want to help this person up or literally kill them for no reason? At least in BioShock, it's about like either self-preservation, like it's less, it's about saving
Yeah, it's
yourself.
not just concretely.
It's not just I'm gonna kill the sisters because it's fun, because that's what like Infamous is like.
Even though that's what Nick said it was about.
Oh yeah, for sure, bro.
Yeah, like Infamous doesn't give you extra resources for
It just makes
being
you
evil.
red.
Yeah, red lightning. Ooh, you do get like black lightning or something if you're fully Infamous, which is very cool. And if you do get more power, I think at the end, I don't even remember what it is. If you like cause another explosion or whatever, I don't know.
Those first two are really good, man.
Like I was saying earlier, I don't think the final boss battle works too well in this game, and I would have preferred.
No, I think the last two levels both.
Yeah. What you think they kind of go downhill a little bit?
The Proving Grounds has dated very poorly. Is that what it's called? After Point Prometheus, where you're just like walking and defending the little. That mission sucks.
I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool in terms of you're becoming a Big Daddy and you're learning to protect these little sisters, and you feel that sense of protection and stuff. But it
just goes on for too long.
It's too long.
It's the
and
same thing.
Yeah, the AI
She
is
walks
not,
really slow.
It says the same like 3 dialogue lines over and over again.
I would be walking in front of her and she'd be saying, "Hurry up, come on!" And I'm like, "I'm in front of you, you come on."
Yeah, it was definitely annoying. It was cool in theory, like suiting up to become this enemy that you were fighting the whole time. But the actual gameplay, once you are the Big Daddy, is definitely dated.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
For sure.
Just that one part.
Yeah. And the final boss fight also is just super
that was
easy.
kind of goofy. It didn't seem... It felt out of place.
Very out of place, where it's like, okay, we need you to fight this big monster now. And like, there was literally no foreshadowing that doing this much plasmids would turn you into like that thing. One thing that's cool about the design is he looks like the statue of Atlas that is in New York City. Yeah, he looks like Dr. Manhattan, but he looks like that metal statue of Atlas, which is very cool as far as the design goes. But the fight itself isn't interesting in any way. It's cool that the little sisters come back to save you. But I definitely think if they had more time to work out a better ending and it was less contrived and less falling into the cliches of that time period, it could have been a lot more interesting, because I do think it peaks at the "Would you kindly" reveal, and then it kind of fails to hit that height again and bring it back to the full conversation again. It turns kind of just into a, okay, now beat the bad guy.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, so Ken Levine said in the director's commentary, "We're not good at boss battles, and that boss battle is silly."
About his own damn game.
Yeah.
Is silly.
So I was thinking, like, listening to that, I was like, it would have been cool if after that the Big Daddy thing where you suit up, it's about just escaping in the Big Daddy suit and getting the sisters out of there. I think that would have been cool, where it's like, because that ends up being what the ending is about, is getting them out of Rapture and being selfless. So I think it would be cool if it was following that story of you getting them to the submarine while Fontaine is trying to prevent you, and Rapture is sinking all around you, because it hints to all the cracks and stuff and how it's starting to flood and fall apart. It would have been kind of like the city sinking and finally crumbling away, and you just kind of trying to leave all those narcissists and power-hungry people behind and just get the innocent people out of there.
Or if Fontaine didn't turn into Dr. Manhattan and you still had, you like were a Big Daddy and you trapped him or whatever, and it gave you the option to save him or kill him, maybe you could tie that into like the meta discussion about whether or not you actually have free will.
Yeah.
What do you think the little sisters got up to after they went upstairs? Like, did they just go get normal jobs and like go on blind dates and be like, "Hey, I used to live underwater with a giant scuba man"?
I think it'd be really funny if they continued to harvest people. Yeah, like they're
They
totally
see a dead
normal,
person
but
on
then
the street and they rush them.
Yeah, they see a dead deer on the side of the road. They're like, "Oh, honey, hold on, I just got to get
where's my syringe?"
You know what's kind of interesting to think about is that at the end you said they save you. Were they actually saving you, or are they just taking advantage of a weakened Fontaine who is full of Adam and harvesting all of that? And then in the good ending, when they're all there with you, when you're in the hospital bed or whatever you're at, are they waiting for you to die? Are they waiting for you to die to harvest you?
That's the long con if they're doing that.
That's a very cynical perspective, but
that's why you gotta harvest them.
The Fontaine part makes sense, that they were drawn to like how much Adam he was carrying, and that but they definitely do have gratitude for you saving them every time you save them. But I wouldn't expect Nick to know that.
Yeah, that's a good contrast of the ending being about being selfless, considering the whole precipice of the setting is about objectivism, and you win by not subscribing to that. And
the hypocrisy of Andrew Ryan's philosophy, because he's all about saying, oh, we need to all have free will, and if we're all free to do what we want, the world will be a utopia. But he literally made this city of free will off the backs of these innocent children who were pulled away from their families and turned unwittingly into these monsters. So
that all have the same voice.
You need he's
by me.
It's very two-faced to say that free will is so necessary when he uses child slaves.
A man chooses, a slave obeys.
So anything else that really stood out to you? Do you have any final impressions that you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover?
It's just a historic game. It still holds up almost as good as it did when I first played it. I don't think there's a game that has hit the aesthetic originality since it, and I think it's just genius. It's a work of art.
I'm really glad that it's been 13 years since that came out, and I hadn't had it spoiled.
Same,
because I still got goosebumps when I got to that
room when I dropped in. I mean, I knew something was up with "Would You Kindly" because Atlas kept saying it, and I had heard that it was a well-known phrase. So I was like, okay, there's going to be some kind of reveal, whatever. I had no clue that that's what it was. It was very, very cool. And I also got goosebumps when you were in that room and everything was piecing it together. It's a
All
very
the
good
flashbacks of every single time he said it.
It's a very good case of the Ludo narrative where you really do feel for that moment.
What?
The Ludo narrative where you feel for that moment that you're in that
Yeah, name
character's
drop, Murph,
shoes,
come on.
and you're the Pseudo Ludo narrative. You feel like you're in the character's shoes, and what's happening to that character is also happening to you. You're like, holy what? Like, that's been the case the whole time? Like, oh my god. One other thing about this theme is one critic actually, the phrase Ludo narrative dissonance actually derives from this game, from an essay written by developer Clint Hawking, and he says there's a Ludo narrative dissonance between the Ludo narrative is the story being told by the gameplay, and he says there's a dissonance because of the story is all about advocating for selflessness and working for others, but he says the gameplay encourages what he views are selfishness and preying on little sisters. And I have to disagree here because I think he's totally missing the point, is that it's harder to do the morally right thing and it's harder to be selfless, but in the end it's more rewarding. And that's the whole point, is they want to, it's not a dissonance, it's a design of the game, of the core mechanic of the game. The core economy is it's easier to do the wrong thing and the selfish thing, and it's harder to be selfless, and you have to work to be selfless. Obviously, this could have been taken even farther if they made the benefits even better for being evil, but it's all about overcoming the personal selfishness that you get by harvesting the atom from the little sisters, and all about foregoing personal benefits and making it harder for yourself to make it easier for others, which I think is just a great theme of the game. And I think it is perfectly told by the gameplay, because you do make it a little bit harder for yourself by choosing to help people.
Well said.
I think more games need to explore that type of gameplay telling the story, as opposed to cutscenes and dialogue, which are all important, but they need to incorporate the gameplay in more games. I think it shouldn't just be clear out this room of enemies, get more story, clean out this next room of enemies, get more story. I'd like to see more cases like BioShock, which clearly everything is entwined: the setting, the dialogue, the characters, and the gameplay.
Stay tuned to whatever Ken Levine's cooking up in the lab now,
Well, I think that about does it. So
what about your trivia? I was looking sweeping the deck here. Wait, and final impressions. Are you big in or not?
Oh, I'm big in. Nick, are you big in?
I'm big in.
Yeah, same.
Big Daddy in.
I'm huge.
Whoa. All right, let's do some trivia. I think you guys will know.
making the top one Big Daddy in is really funny.
Yeah, I'm little sister out. I think you guys will know most of these. I got some of these from the developer commentary. So Nick, you might know some. Nick, you actually
wait a minute.
Nick revealed one ahead of time, because one of them was what was Atlas's original accent, and it was a Southern drawl.
Oh,
I'm so smart.
We'll remove that one.
He's thinking out of linear time.
Question number 1: who is the voice actor for the Circus of Values vending machine clown?
Brian, do you know? Because I know.
You know?
Yeah.
Come on. Is it a video game actor? Like, is it somebody I would know?
You could say that.
in a way.
Troy Baker.
No, Nick.
Ken Levine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that makes sense.
Ken Levine recorded it himself, which is really funny. He said his wife hates when he does that voice.
Come on down to the Circus of Value.
That's a good time. Get some money, buddy, or whatever.
Yeah. Come back when you get some money, buddy. All right. So before Would You Kindly, what was the original phrase that was going to trigger the mind control?
Nick, do you know this?
No, I don't remember.
Nice. I'm going to say, can you please?
Can you please, like Ken? Ken Levine.
No, please.
Nick,
I'm pretty pleased with the cherry on top.
No, so I'll give you one more clue. It was taken from Ken Levine's adoration of Stan Lee.
With great power?
Nope. Although the original run of Spider-Man is about objectivism, so that's an interesting thing.
I'm not sure.
It's Excelsior.
Oh, okay.
Which I don't know how they were going to...
Yeah. that was going to be my other guess, but I was like, how would you say that in a sentence?
Would You Kindly is so innocuous that it's a really good phrase for that, which is, because you could just say that and then...
Yeah.
not bring attention to it. What movie inspired the design behind the Little Sisters?
There's no way this isn't The Ring. No way.
Nick?
I don't know.
It was the twins from The Shining.
Damn it.
Yeah. You had the right horror, right genre there. So, next
I guess
question.
that makes sense. I feel like they look more like The Ring. I mean, their hair's not down like that, but The Shining, I guess the outfit is similar.
After playtesting revealed that the game was not enjoyed by players, Levine and the team rushed to add this scene into the game at the last minute in order to give the players a connection to the playable character. First off, I think it's crazy that after playtesting, they sounded like it sounded like they were going to have a bomb on their hands. Like it sounded like no one enjoyed it, which is really funny because it ended up becoming, one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time.
I feel like that happens a lot with these types of things, like artsier things. I think play testing I get with like bugs, but like focus group stuff I just think is so stupid.
Right.
Because it's such a small sample size, you have no idea how people are going to react.
Yeah.
And like they'll fundamentally change the way that movies and games and stuff come out because of like what 20 people in a room say.
Right. And they're usually your average Joes. They're not like huge fans of, immersive sim games or whatever, which it's kind of weird.
I'm going to say the plane crash opening cutscene.
Nick?
Yes.
Just yes.
Do you know? Is that why?
I think that's what it is, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It is that. And he said it was because characters were not connecting to the character, so they gave a little bit of backstory. And
That's about as little of a bit as you can get.
I guess originally it's literally started with you waking up in the ocean after the crash. So they literally just added that scene of you on the plane smoking a cigarette.
Nah, that line of dialogue is a good time. When he's like, they say you're special or whatever.
He must be a really good writer because it sounded like they literally said it came up in like a day where they did all this. They made it in engine and then they recorded it in engine so they didn't have to worry about bugs happening because obviously, they were editing right in the last minute. So they recorded it in engine and they added in that one line and made him smoking a cigarette to kind of set the scene. But it's also really cool because it throws back the reveal. He has a package and it says, "Would you kindly not open this until whatever?" And then it has a gun in it, and he's the one that hijacked the plane and brought it down, which is super cool, and it adds a little bit more context. He said he was inspired by Lost, how to set up a quick way to empathize with the characters to like the plane crash scene in Lost, I guess. But anyways, so you guys both did good. I didn't keep score.
I won.
We're all winners.
I don't know if that's true, but
No, it's not at all. Wait,
I
don't
only
think
got
either.
one more right than you.
No, I think we both got one right because you knew the first one.
And I
Neither of us got.
I made him get rid of the accent one, so I'm.
Yeah, he really just robbed you of that. I don't know what you would have guessed.
I would not have gotten that, I don't think. Actually, I probably would have. That seems pretty... maybe I would have said like Boston or something.
Yeah.
We'll never know.
Well, that was fun, guys.
Was it?
Yeah.
Wait, actually, I have a trivia question.
Okay, let's hear.
Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow?
Ooh.
A worm looks up and sees a god.
The men in Washington would have you say, no, it belongs to the poor. And the men in the Vatican would say, no, it belongs to God. So, I don't know.
The men in Russia would say, no, it belongs to us all. A man chooses, a slave obeys.
That was such a good scene.
Yeah, it seems iconic, to say the least.
I was like also desperately clicking every button to see if that would like be a secret way to choose as opposed to obey.
Desperately.
I was like, come on.
Like Andrew Ryan was going to come in your house.
I was hoping that it would be like a button prompt, maybe, instead of like a button prompt where you hit him, but you could not hit it, and then maybe after like...
Yeah, if you stood still for like 15 seconds or something.
Or if you press F to pay respects.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's wrap it up, and we will get back to our regular programming next week. And I think our deep dive for the month of May this month is going to be Chrono Trigger, which celebrated its 25th anniversary this year.
Oh, wow, good timing.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that, and we will see you next week.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.
My little sisters and big daddies. each do our longest clicker voice ever, like the noise from Last of Us at once. That's how you sync up. Yeah, you got the right idea. It sounded like a wet fart, whatever that was.
It really did.
Oh man.